Hello, everyone. I wanted to make a video just talking about an updated buyer's guide for Series 3 players that have just gotten to Series 3 or been in Series 3 in a while. Sometimes I get questions like, what card should I spend my tokens on? Should I spend my tokens on this? Should I spend my tokens on that? So we've updated the pool three tokens guy. I had a one before, but it was definitely outdated. Leaders like in the top and things like that. So hopefully this should help the people deciding what series three cards should I focus on in the token shop. As you've heard, I do recommend you should be buying series three cards for especially at the beginning for the majority. Once you get near the end, then you probably have a good enough collection that you don't need to be picking up more Series 3 cards because you already have a deck you like you can play with. But definitely at the beginning, near the middle, I definitely recommend you want to be picking up Series 3 cards, fleshing out your collection, making sure things you have options to play with. So let's just go jump right into it and get started. So at the top, we have Arrow. So Arrow's at the top. Arrow's the best. We're gonna have this link for you in the description. Hopefully, I should remember. But generally, as we're going through it, Arrow's at the top. I think Arrow's just the one of the best cards, if not the best card in the game. That's a little bit arguable, but it's definitely top three. I would say that's pretty easy, hard to contest. It's a card that wins you turn sixes pretty easily, pretty powerful. It has good base power, 5-7 power is really strong, and just shuts down some plays your opponents want to do. If they want to play Wong, if they want to, contest a lane, you just shut those things down. So definitely a really strong card. Definitely flexible. It can fit in so many decks. Really good, really powerful. Just a very, very strong card throughout. Next up, we have She-Hulk. She-Hulk, insanely strong, really good. Opens up some combinations. You can do some plays with it. With Magic and Infinite, you can go Infinite, She-Hulk, things like that. It can be really, really strong, especially now that Leader's been nerfed. You don't have that downside of people playing Leader and taking your Infinite She-Hulks and things like that. So definitely a really powerful card, really strong, really flexible. Can fit into a lot of compositions, so definitely a strong card. Sarah, we're not gonna go through every 81 cards, right? But like definitely the top like 10 we're or more or 20 we're gonna talk about. Sarah, really strong, really powerful, just opens up very strong turn six plays. You can also like Psylocke into Sarah on 4, and that's also really, really powerful. Most people don't do that, but it's something you can do. So yeah, just opens up a lot of powerful plays. There's a lot of turn six plays that are only available if you have a Sarah on the board. So yeah, really, really good. Death, you can tell Secondary really loves death locations. They keep adding them, and Death is really the best card at abusing those type of locations. 12 power for cheap or free is just nothing to scoff at. So yeah, Death always seems to have a place where you can play it in, and with the Wolverine buffs, destroy decks are a little bit more popular. So if you have your own or you want to just surprise them with your own death, this can be a very good tool. Daredevil, I think Daredevil is just so good, so strong at winning cubes, getting people to leave. Just that information that you see, and then also being able to snap right after you see their play is just brings such fear into players, and just a really, really strong card that can win you cubes. So, and it's very easy to put in decks because it's only 2 mana, so it's not a huge commitment and it has a big payoff. Doctor Doom is definitely just a well balanced 6 drop, I would say. Is a 6 drop people don't play around, 6 drops that you can just surprise people with, get to locations that you don't have access to. Just a really strong 6 drop to play with. Lockjaw is a card that lets you cheat out mana. Same thing with Electro. They both do very similar things where they let you cheat out mana and get cards that are high cost on the board earlier than normal. So definitely really powerful at doing that well. Lockjaw and Electro, and just fits into decks that want to play a lot of big stuff. Dracula, this card could be even higher than it is, though it does require specific decks to build into, and it's not a card you can just play willy nilly. But Dracula is definitely a strong card. It's one of those weird cards that have like no counterplay. In essence, you can't Shang-Chi it, you can't Enchantress it, you can't really do much to deal with it. The only The only way to deal with it is like you play like maybe Black Widow turn 6 or Maximus turn 6 to really give weird cards into their hand. But like that's an awkward way of dealing with cards, and not many decks won't have an answer like that. So definitely a strong card to have on your board. And if you can make the right deck with it, just very good. Mystique is very flexible, fits into a lot of deck archetypes. Even if you have no other cards, you can play Dino with Mystique. So yeah, just a very strong card. Gets better the more cards you have, and opens up a lot of different combinations. Magneto's really good. This tier list is made with Zabu Surfer meta in mind. And Magneto's just really good for that. You move the Surfer, you move the Zabu cards, and just surprise or annoy your opponent. If they are expecting their board to have this much of power, you can Magneto their cards away and make their boards a little bit less resilient. Patriot, I think, is just a strong archetype. A lot of cards don't see play until you have a Patriot, and it's just an archetype that opens up like Ultron, Doctor Doom synergy, and it's just generally good. I think it's just a good archetype to have if you get it early. Brood as well fits with so many things: Cerebro, Patriot, Surfer. There's so many cards that Brood works with. Just a very strong piece of the puzzle if you want to build any respectable compositions of those archetypes. Hood's just a good strong card, especially if you are or still running Killmonger or you're running Death or things like that. Hood just gives you a lot of power. It can also be like a really cool play if you play into a bar with no name to get under 0 power, but a lot of times that's pretty niche, but it's still a pretty good card. Wasp Wasp's a pretty solid card. 0 mana is actually a very premium price tag or cost to have, so it costing 0 is really good. And then you can just synergize with Lockjaw, synergize with Patriot, things like that. So it has a lot of utility in there. Absorbing Man, some people are saying Absorbing Man's like not that good unless you have Zabu, but even then you can copy Jubilee, you can copy Doctor Doom if you do it early, you can copy a lot of interesting cards. I think it's a card that hasn't been fully utilized yet, but can be after more people test it, more people play with it. So definitely think there's a lot of potential for Absorbing Man, and I think it's a card that you do want in your lineup in case anything changes and like, ooh, now it's a card that's gonna get better with time. So definitely a strong card. Wave's a card that synergizes with Death really well. It's a little bit worse now because of Zabu. Zabu just like laughs in the face of Wave a lot of the time. So it's definitely a card you maybe want to wait till the Zabu nerfs before you really pick up, but generally it's a good card, really strong, can win you games by itself, especially decks that want to flood turn 6. Destroyer, just a big powerful board card on the board, and opens up the Spectrum Destroyer lists that are pretty good, especially early into pull 3. So definitely a unique and strong card to pick up. Magic opens up some synergy with Mr. Negative, so they kind of work together, open up some synergy, and just they Magic actually has some annoying properties with some of the meta game right now. Deathhawk doesn't like it if you can play Magic and things like that. But overall, I would say it's a little bit lower on the tier list, but it has some synergies and is a decent card to have if you can pick it up. Thor is just a strong 3. So Reap not me, but like yeah, Thor is just a really strong 3 that has a lot of good synergies with locations, cloning vats, Kalamatar, a lot of locations where you just play this thing and you feel really good about it. Sinister location, things like that. Cerebro, this card I would say maybe is not the strongest or most built around, but it's definitely one of the funnest cards in the game, and it opens up a lot of different Cerebro compositions. So it's in here because it's just a unique card, just a fun card, a card you want to make work, and just is a cool design, and is you can definitely have a lot of fun messing around with Cerebro decks. So it's just something you want to be having access to early, because this is a card that can give you a lot of things to think about, ways to play, and has some pretty decent deck archetypes to back up the card. So definitely think it's a reasonable card to be here. Then we have some good cards. Juggernaut is a really good tier 3 or 3 cost card, can lock down location, go Storm Juggernaut, things like that. Maximus is just like turn 6, 7 power, really, really good. Um, and also works with Silver Surfer and all those scenarios. It's also a good card against Dracula. So if they're playing Dracula, you can Maximus them on 6 and give them worse things to mill. Zero's a pretty strong card. 1 mana 3, like little drawback, is actually very good, and it opens and turns cards that are generically bad very good. Ebony Maw, Red Skull, Typhoid Mary, those cards become good with 0. Mildred's a pretty decent card. You can play it in ongoing. You can also play it in Zulus, with Kazar and things like that. If they're also contesting the lane, then you drop the Mojo. You have a 2 power 8, really, really hard to deal with. Quinjet is just a card that opens up a lot of synergies and has some really good combos with Moon Girl, White Queen, things like that, where you're stealing cards. So this is a really strong card. I think it opens up a lot of compositions, not a lot of compositions, but a decent amount of compositions, and is a card people will feel threatened by when you play it on 1. Ghost Rider synergizes with the Dracula, where it just fits in how the deck wants to play, and Lady Sin Dracula is just a very, very strong combo. So yeah, seems pretty good. Invisible Woman, you could argue not that strong right now, but I think especially with Modar coming, you're gonna see more of this card, and just opens up some ways to hide your game plan. Right? If you think, oh, you're doing a pretty obvious game plan, you can hide it with the Invisible Woman so that they don't exactly know what you're working with. Green Goblin used to be my favorite Series 3 card, but because of Silver Surfer, it's definitely a lot worse. Hopefully, the nerf to Silver Surfer will make this card a little bit more prominent. But yeah, there are some. Oh, you can't even see this. Sorry. There are some. Um, there are some locations that Green Goblin absolutely destroys, like Space Stone, not cloning vets, but Space Stone, the one that fills the your location with the same card. That one, if you Green Goblin, you give them 4. You keep 1, but you give them 4. And other locations like that, the one that gives ticks for -1 every turn, you play this on 3. It's -7. So there's a lot of locations where Green Goblin is just really, really premium. So definitely a strong card. I would say definitely worse because of Silver Surfer, but still has its uses. Now those are the cards I'm really gonna I've dived deep, but there are still cards. There are still other cards. These cards, I would say, they're not necessarily recommended because they require either some more pieces, or they're not consistent, or I wouldn't want you initially spending your like precious 3,000 tokens on these type of cards. So obviously, if you know this is exactly the card you need to fit your deck list, then I would say okay, go for it. But you have to be really sure that this card is going to be useful. There's a lot of times you're going to think you're gonna want to play with a card, spend the tokens, and then 2 weeks or a week later, you're like, why did I waste my 1,000 tokens on this card? This card is actually not that premium. And that's what I kind of want to address here with some of these cards. Not saying you can't pick them up, but just be really careful. Make sure you ask for second opinions before you confirm it. That would be my advice for all of these cards. Just go to a streamer, say, oh, I want to buy this card. What do you think about this? And then see what they think about it, and then give the context, like, oh, I can make a Hela deck perfectly. Oh, Wong fits perfectly into my list. Ultron is great. And I'm playing Patriot, then yeah, I agree with you. That kind of thing. So just for these cards, make sure you just get a second opinion. Is it'd be my advice. But I don't think these are bad hits. You wanna make sure that you're not wasting your tokens. Where the ones before, it's hard to have wasted your tokens with these. But these next ones, I do think you could potentially be wasting it. So first off, we have Hazmat and Luke Cage. So both of these cards kind of fit together. They make the Hazmat Luke Cage deck. I think they could be good. And there is a composition where you give your opponents a ton of like bad cards, and Hazmat and Luke Cage can be really a good finisher for that. So definitely think they have some play and some use, but they're kind of in a niche spot. They don't fit into a lot of decks, so it's hard to recommend them for the general guide. But I think there are good cards that can do a lot of things. So I don't think they're bad. Ultron, same thing. Good in Patriot, really good in Patriot, but doesn't really fit a ton of other decks and can mess up your game plan if your opponent if this card drops on the board early, it can lose you the game, right? So there's a bit of downside with Ultron, but definitely a good strong card if you have synergy for it. Psylocke, same thing, right? You Psylocke into Mr. Negative, things like that. I'm pretty sure Mr. Negative was up here, right? With magic, yeah, for sure. Okay, so you saw it into Mr. Negative, right? That can be pretty powerful. So has some synergy there. Zola has some synergies as well, but you need other cards usually to make it work, and it's really premium with Shuri, which is tier 5. Same thing with Taskmaster. Um, it's really premium with Shuri, and you're not gonna really have Shuri this early, so a lot of times it's not that good. Rock Slide's good with Darkhawk, but not really anything else. But in the Darkhawk deck, it's really good. Debris is pretty good in Patriot, and is a really strong card. It's just hard to fit in a lot of decks, and it's a card that requires thinking, especially if you're new to Series 3 or new to the game. You're not really gonna maximize how good Debris is. Captain Marvel's okay. Only downside is sometimes the AI of Captain Marvel can feel like it's cheating you. Where if you like have 4 of them and they all individually check, so none of them move, but if all of them moved, you'd win. Like things like that. The AI for Captain Marvel is not super great, so that's kind of the issue with it. But it is an okay card. Hella is strong, but it's kind of hit or miss. It's definitely a deck you have to build around, and there's always the I'm going to play my discard. Discard hits Hella. Oh, now I've lost instantly. So definitely has some problems to it. Wong, definitely think I'll get some comments about Wong being this low. I just don't think it's a card that really gets better um as you fight better opponents. This is a card early into pool 3, like if this is your first pickup, like you can definitely destroy people because people won't be prepared to deal with how good Wong can make your numbers. But I think as people get better, people have more answers. People will play Cosmo, they'll play Arrow, they'll play Enchantress, they'll Rogue, they'll find ways to deal around your Wong, and it becomes less of a win con. And anytime you think you're gonna win with Wong and you don't, you're losing 8 cubes, right? So it can be very punishing. So I wouldn't. I'm not gonna put in the recommended, but it is a strong card, and I can definitely see people having differences about this card in particular, and I think it's fair. But in my criteria, I wouldn't recommend it. Polaris, I think, is a good card. I just don't think it's a card that stands on its own. I think it's a card that does really well um when synergized with other cards and other deck types. But as a solo card, is there a card I recommend you spend like your first 1,000 tokens on? Not really. I do think into Space Stone it's pretty cool because you can move a cheap card into a Space Stone. They can't really react to it, so it has some uses. But um, I can see this one being wrong. Basically, I'm not going to say like this is like guaranteed tier list, but I can definitely see Polaris being wrong. Same thing with Red Skull. I think Red Skull is also pretty good, but it's a card that needs other pieces for it to really work out well. I love that I put needs other pieces on there because that's what I'm saying. I'm not looking at that and I'm still saying that, so it's actually kind of true. Titania, um, it's a good card, a good finisher. It's definitely great in Zoo, but it's hard to see where it fully shines without some real thought behind the deck building. So it's not a easy card to slot in except for Zoo, but in the other decks it requires like a lot of deck building and thought process there. Goose is a little bit worse because of Zabu. I actually think if Zabu wasn't in, Goose would be way higher in the recommended section, but because of Zabu, like Zabu just doesn't care about Goose at all, and it feels bad. Yellow Jacket, I think, is actually okay. Definitely not as good as Wasp, but has a lot of potential. You can do things with Professor X. You can do things with Lockjaw. So it's not a bad card. It's just it's not a card you want to pick up first piece. And then some of the next ones okay but lacking. They're okay cards, but they're not amazing. They don't really carry you. Crossbone, Thor, Octopus, Deadpool, Rogue. Like these cards need other pieces, and even if you do get them, they don't mean that you can build around them or carry a game with them. So that's kind of the problem with them. And then these fun with if you're a whale are just like cards that can be fun to play with, but a lot of times I wouldn't really recommend you spend your tokens on most of the time. So Hellcat we got Moon Knight, Omega Red, Beast, Venom, Gigantos, Spider-Man, Drax, Typhoid Mary, Rescue, Human Torch, and Black Cat. They can be fun to play with, but I think a lot of times if these are like your core cards, you're gonna be like, they're not good enough to really carry me. So that's kind of the issue with them. And then the not like horrible level, these cards can work, but they're a little bit they're a little bit iffy, I guess, in terms of like how good they're gonna be. Actually, I should just move my camera up. That makes more sense. Uh, so Cullen Wing, Gamblet, those are both discard cards, not amazing. Kingpin, I think is probably should probably be in fun if you're a whale. I actually think this is a little bit better than that. So but it's hard to make Kingpin work. I've noticed, like it's actually hard to do it a lot of the time. And people like if you play Kingpin early, people just play all their cards there, so you don't get to utilize it. So a lot of times it's hard to make it work. But I do think it has a use and it can be decent. So I think maybe this should be up one, but generally you get the idea, right? You shouldn't be buying any of these in essence. Falcom, same thing. It has a niche deck, but it's not consistent and it's not something you want to really focus on getting early. Viper works with Sentry, but and also works with filling your hand with junk or filling their opponent's board with junk with hazmat, but definitely not something you want super early, and you have to kind of build around it. So if that's like the last card you need, then sure. But other than that, I wouldn't recommend it. Ronin's kind of like a worse dino, a worse Darkhawk. It's really the worst of the three. Don't super recommend it. They might introduce cards that make it better, but right now, not really. Agatha's hard. It's good for farming boosters, but you don't really want to play an Agatha deck a lot of the time, so I wouldn't really super recommend it. Black Bolt has seen its niche, and sometimes it's been good, especially if Death is super popular. You can Black Bolt their Death away, and that's like so strong. But generally, a lot of times, it's not the greatest card. But I do think like in some metas, it's actually pretty decent. So I will throw that in there. And then these last ones are like just bad, should be free. Like you shouldn't be getting these as a series 3 reward generally. So I'm not a big fan of these ones being something you can hit. So yeah, Baron Mordo, Adam Warlock, Crystal Dagger, Quake, Nick Fury, Leader. Um, don't love that there are cards that you can hit. Unfortunately for Leader, right? Leader used to be at the very top, and now it's at the very bottom. So yeah, they really took Leader out back. But overall, these are my current thoughts. But don't really focus too much on the bottom. Really focus at the top, and the top end's really where all of the meat is. So that's overall the list, and hopefully some explanations for the cards, and this should help new players or players in the mid of series 3 figure out what they want to focus on. I will say in a week after Zabu is nerfed, this could be absolutely obsolete because a whole new meta springs up, but it's hard for cards to move too much up and down. But I will say like uh, uh, a different meta can definitely change some of the cards around. So, but overall, I'm pretty happy with this list. Had some help with it. So, um, take care of yourselves. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one or so. Bye bye. Why did I do that?